The Horus Heresy is the great betrayal at the heart of the Warhammer setting, where the Warmaster Horus led half the legions of Space Marines against the Emperor on Earth. To achieve this, many of the more loyal legions needed to be misdirected, tricked, assigned to battlefields far away where they could be picked off one by one, but the 10th Legion, the Iron Hands, one of the strongest, most powerful of the Loyalist legions, were also one of the first casualties of the war, and it was entirely their own fault. Hiya, welcome to Heresy 101. In this little series, I've been going through all the lore for each of Warhammer's Space Marine legions, particularly their origin in the grim days of the Horus Heresy. I'm taking a look at where they are at the start of the heresy and how they got there, and then what happens to them during it. So before we begin, this series contains spoilers for all sorts of heresy stuff, including the Black Library novel series. At the end of the Great Crusade, as the Horus Heresy unfolded across the galaxy, the Iron Hands were one of the most reliable, famed, and powerful legions of the Imperium, and their commander Ferrus Manus one of the most senior of the Primarchs. But their pride and obsession with their own strength would make them one of the earliest casualties of the heresy, incapable of stopping Horus's advance. The history of the 10th Legion, like all the legions, starts during the Unification Wars on Terra. As the Emperor concluded his unification of Old Earth, the first few hundred Astartes warriors from each of the legions joined the war. But for the 10th Legion, their first recorded battles come slightly later, as this new Imperium started to reach outwards from Terra to unify the solar system. At this time, the 10th were much like any of the other legions, and they fought with honor in the pacification of the solar system against enemies like the Mycan aggregation, and they were noted to be remarkably disciplined and well coordinated, taking many of their initial objectives quickly and with few losses. But it wasn't until the Great Crusade pushed out into the galaxy that their particular specialization became apparent. The 10th Legion was one of a few legions who'd recruited heavily from the area of Earth known as Old Albia, a particularly warlike pre-imperial society, and during the Battle of Rust against the Orc Crooked Claw Empire, the 10th are first recorded as using the Old Albion tactic known as the Hammer and the Storm. The Lord Commander of the Legion, Amadeus Duquesne, deployed allied Imperial Army units into a triangular defensive position in between multiple Orc population centers in an ostentatious drop deployment. In doing this, he raised the storm, using the army units as a lure to goad more and more of the Orcs out of their positions to attack the defenders. Once the main force of the Orcs had been committed, the hammer of the 10th Legion struck. Gunships blew a hole in the horde, and into this the 10th poured a massed infantry and heavy armor advance. Almost the whole legion committed at once, plowing into and through the Orc horde as a slow, steadily advancing arrowhead, putting out a relentless torrent of firepower. By the time the action had been completed, the bulk of the Orc horde was destroyed with relatively few losses, except of course on the part of the lure. It was a tactic Duquesne would use again and again, and the 10th Legion became known as the Storm Walkers because of it. In fact, this early in the Crusade, it was a tactic studied and copied by many other legions, and the 10th started to acquire a reputation for this sort of remorseless, highly coordinated warfare. Large set-piece battles, close armored vehicle support, crushing some of the most dangerous military opponents of the Imperium. The 10th Legion became one of the stars of the early Crusade era. But however this might have developed, it would be cut short because a few years into the Crusade, their Primarch would be discovered on the post-industrial world of Medusa. Ferrus Manus was only the third Primarch to be discovered in the Great Crusade, after Horus and Liman Rus, and this was because the world he landed on, Medusa in the Sithlenius system, was a priority target for both the Imperium and the Mechanicum of Mars. Before the Age of Strife descended, Medusa was a famed civilization of great importance, a mineral-rich world ringed by the legendary Telstarax, a planet-circling orbital station. In fact, it's likely that 5,000 years before, as warp storms descended on the galaxy and made travel impossible, local human refugees had swarmed to Medusa, bringing their own traditions and making it a repository of technical knowledge. But as the Age of Strife continued, its population had dwindled. Medusa was a harsh planet to live on, dotted with exhausted mines and caves containing dark constructs from the ancient age of technology, and littered with broken pieces of the Telstarax that have fallen to the surface. Its population had devolved into numerous competing tech clans that roamed the wastes in giant land crawlers. Their rulers a caste of priests and tech sages known as the Iron Fathers. When the 20 infant Primarchs were scattered from Terra at the end of the Unification Wars, the capsule of the 10th made planetfall at the highest point of Medusa, the realm of Karashi, always avoided by the clans because of the ancient tech monsters that haunted it. Very little's recorded of his early life, and most of that is folk tales, but it's known that at some point he battled a great silver worm-like construct and, killing it by plunging it into a lake of lava, his forearms became coated in the strange living metal it was made from, earning him the clan name he became known by, Ferrus Manus, the Iron-Handed. He became a legend to the tribes, moving amongst them, learning and sharing technological knowledge, breaking open ancient vaults, but never trying to unify them. He was concerned mostly with testing his own strength, seeking out new challenges, and he believed that the best way to keep the clans of Medusa strongest was to let them continue to compete with each other. By the time the Emperor had come to claim him for the Great Crusade, Ferrus Manus was warlord, demigod, and sage to the people of Medusa, and it is said that he was waiting and that he more than half suspected the purpose of his creation. He spent time with his father on Terra, learning the ways of the Imperium, and within a few years he was transferred full control of the Legion, renaming it the Iron Hands and reorganizing it into a meticulous engine of war. Ferrus was a harsh and unremitting master, intolerant of failure and swift to anger, and he saw the 10th Legion as an extension of himself. He took their preference for systematic, set-piece conflicts and matched it to a belligerent sense of pride and anger, and a tradition of technological advancement and superiority that meshed well with the Legion's existing reliance on armoured vehicles. Victory by the most direct and efficient means possible was the Legion's mantra. They would be the hand that reached out and crushed the enemies of humanity, as unfeeling, relentless, and coldly implacable as the Iron Hand they had so fittingly taken for their name. The new Legion became renowned for confronting the enemies of the Imperium head-on, conducting high-intensity campaigns against Xenos like the Orcs or technologically superior human empires, and this method of war saw them working closely with the Mechanicum and the Titan Legions. The Iron Hands were in great demand throughout the Crusade and often formed the backbone and centre of joint operations with other legions, Ferrus Manus often taking on a command role over later found Primarchs. But the Legion wasn't without its detractors. Their methods were lethal to the human troops that fought alongside them. The Iron Hands cared little for the lives of their allies in the pursuit of victory, and Ferrus Manus cared little for the politics of the Great Crusade. He was a senior field commander of the Imperium, but he saw himself as a conqueror, not a ruler. He had decent enough relations with many of the other Primarchs, but few close friends, with the exception of Fulgrim, Primarch of the Emperor's Children, who shared his obsession with perfection and superiority. So it was that when Horus Lupercal was declared War Master at the end of the Great Crusade, on the surface Ferrus Manus supported him and continued to campaign alongside him, and it's possible that Horus thought he might be swayed to the traitor's cause. Fulgrim certainly attempted to persuade him in that direction. But in the end, there was still a core of resentment there, and because of this, the Iron Hands Legion and their Primarch would be one of the first victims of the Horus Heresy. At the start of the Horus Heresy, the Iron Hands Legion numbered around 113,000 Astartes, but with a large reserve of support vehicles, supplies, and a sizable fleet. So while this placed them within the middle tier of legion strengths, they were actually a much greater military power than other legions of a similar size. The legion was divided into a number of clans. Each clan was structured like a mini pocket legion, comprised of a number of companies, each with different specializations, and a typical battle group would be drawn entirely from one clan. This had the effect of generating competition and even friction between the clans for glory and success in the eyes of their Primarch, which was intentional. Ferrus Manus even rewarded the most favoured clans with the best equipment. Within the clan, organisation was extremely detailed, and commanders of every level held the power of life and death over their subordinates. Again, this was intentional, designed so that any weak link could be quickly identified by Ferrus Manus himself. Compared to the other legions, the Iron Hands fielded a large number of war machines and armour, especially dreadnoughts, and were only surpassed in this by the 4th Legion, the Iron Warriors. Their ties to Mars and the Mechanicum gave them access to greater numbers of new and experimental Martian systems, like graviton weapons, conversion beamers, and battle automata. And cybernetic augmentations were commonplace. They were also instrumental in the development of new technologies like the Thunder Hammer or Indomitus Terminator armor. When the Horus Heresy broke out and the initial 4 traitor legions cleansed their ranks of loyalists on Istvan III, the Iron Hands were engaged as part of the 52nd Expeditionary Fleet. When news came of the betrayal, along with orders for 7 legions to redeploy to Istvan V and end the rebellion, Ferrus Manus was enraged. As his slow, ponderous legion attempted to disengage, he took a task force, his then favoured Avernii clan, and made full speed for the Istvan system, where, without waiting for the rest of his legion to arrive, he assumed command of the operation and immediately deployed to the surface alongside the Salamanders and the Raven Guard Legion, by that point the only other 2 legions to have arrived. The resulting battle, known as the Drop Site Massacre, was an overwhelming victory for Horus's traitors. The initial drop force was hopelessly outnumbered, doubly so when the second supporting wave of 4 legions, the Alpha Legion, Wordbearers, Iron Warriors, and Night Lords, revealed their allegiance and cut down the Loyalists. Much of the Iron Hands force, as well as the Salamanders and Raven Guard, were annihilated, and Ferrus Manus himself was cut down in single combat by his former friend, Fulgrim of the Emperor's Children. After this, the Iron Hands fractured. The competition between clans that kept them strong under Ferrus meant that they had no way of coming together in his absence. The disparate companies of the Iron Hands, disagreeing over what to do next, scattered and took to fighting a grueling guerrilla war against traitor forces, either as clan-level armies like those of the Morrigal clan, or as elements of what became known as the Shattered Legions. Often these Shattered Legion forces would contain elements of the Salamanders or the Raven Guard, but many Iron Hands refused to fight alongside them, blaming them for their failure on Istvan, and this was symptomatic of a deeper problem in the Legion. Their pride in their own strength shattered, much of the Legion became almost self-loathing. Some outright blamed the Legion as a whole, or the other clans, or their Primarch Ferrus for being too weak, for failing. Many cast off their livery entirely and went renegade, or fought on alone with no markings as Black Shields. Many fell deeper into the practice of replacing their body parts with cybernetic upgrades in the hope of becoming stronger, something kind of discouraged while Ferrus was still alive. He always viewed his reliance on his strange metal arms as weakness. Over the course of the heresy, Iron Hands elements held back traitor advances on hundreds of worlds, harrying the forces of Horus all the way to Terra. But they were never able to unite as a legion again, and their own shame often made them unwilling to join up with wider loyalist elements. They were the most shattered of all the shattered legions, and that fracture continued all the way into the 41st millennium. And that's the 10th Legion, the bedrock of the Great Crusade, a great engine of war fighting the biggest and bloodiest battles of the 31st millennium with a mixture of strength, pride, fury, and meticulously applied force. But they were also one of the first and greatest casualties of the heresy. Their Primarch's anger and impatience led to his death, and their own inability to deal with it led to their fracture as a legion. So much so that their reorganization after the heresy into the chapters of Space Marines we know from 40k was almost a foregone conclusion. Thanks for watching. Okay, so if you'd like more heresy content, then click on that thingy right there on the right. The next Legion is probably lining itself up for you, and if you'd like to see some videos early or just support the channel, there's a Patreon link below. See ya!